Eswatini's largest opposition party, the People's United Democratic Movement, or PUDEMO, says the deportation of convicted criminals by the United States to the African state is very unlawful. This after the government of Eswatini this week confirmed that the United States had sent 5 immigrants that were convicted of various crimes to the country as President Donald Trump ramps up his deportation efforts. Now, the 5 men are citizens of Vietnam, Jamaica, Yemen, Cuba and Laos, and have been convicted in the United States of crimes ranging from child rape to murder. PUDEMO's president, Mlungisi Makhanya, says the move is a contravention of the country's laws. Let's now welcome political analyst Dr. Siphetfo Dlamini on the line to help us further unpack this. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you. Let's get your take on this matter. So reports from the United States indicate that they can, under, of course, their third country deportation policy, send these offenders that are not wanted by their countries of origin. But how does then Eswatini fit into this rule?
I think it's a beautiful evening to you and your viewers. SABC. I think one must first indicate that, the solid question on the deportees that have just been received is what I may refer to as a diplomatic oversight, one that is characterized by high levels of geopolitical insensitivity and breaking international norms and expected standards on migration. And we will remember that some of these deportees, especially migrants and refugees, some of them are increasingly started being used as bargaining chip, particularly in the broader discourse of global diplomacy. And I'm thinking now what is basically transpiring is basically, having some of these deportees being used for other missions and other, engagements that could probably be perceived to be happening, behind closed doors. But it's also important for me to reiterate what others have been indicating previously, to say the country Eswatini has now started to be really perceived as, a dumping site for illegal criminals, as they have been called monsters, particularly by the USA government officials. And with that, I think there's quite a number of questions that we may wish to be asking ourselves than, the answers that we are basically receiving.
Doctor, well, apparently these aren't the only offenders that have been sent to Africa by the United States. Apparently they've already sent aid to South Sudan in secret also, after the Supreme Court had actually lifted restrictions of sending people to where they actually have no ties. And we understand that the South Sudanese government is still very mum on the whereabouts of these men, as is the case probably in Eswatini.
That's not the only case. We remember that a few months back, as you correctly putting it, that, there were actually concerns that were raised after some of the deportees were sent to South Sudan. In fact, what was quite interesting was the USA government official's reaction, who also happens to be the spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, referred by the name of Trisha. And to her, really, she referred to these deportees as uniquely barbaric monsters. And I really find such, bizarre. So we're basically seeing, weaker countries, particularly the third world countries, being forced to basically take some of these deportees. Now, we should also remember that the same Department of Homeland Security further reacted to the federal judge a ruling that he made, I think he's from Massachusetts, to keep some of the migrants sent to South Sudan in America's soil. So he was basically saying some of these deportees must remain in America. While that may be reference to South Sudan specifically, we find a nexus between those who play on matters relating to judiciary work and those whom we can be thought of as centers of political power, particularly in democratic states such as the United States of America. So we've got quite a number of questions that we may basically be asking. For example, which country deserves to keep these so-called uniquely barbaric monsters? And if indeed they are called barbaric monsters, why then would they have to be deported to other countries? But there's quite a plethora of other issues, and I think this matter really needs to be revisited, particularly by the international community and the other countries that are basically concerned. I think, lastly, on this question, I have a strong belief that, bringing about such, deportees to the Kingdom of Eswatini basically leads me to a plausible conclusion that Eswatini did not receive or did not seem to have an option but to be forced to accept these deportees. And one of the key reasons, of course, is that it is my view that these high-risk criminals have been used, once again, as bargaining chip in broader discourse of diplomacy, of global diplomacy.
Absolutely, Doctor. I mean, concerns also are that these criminals, I'm sure you've seen some of the social media outrage there, saying these criminals could potentially end up here in South Africa. And one wonders then, what is actually contained in those release conditions that were actually mentioned by the United States as negotiated with Eswatini? PUDEMO says this is completely unlawful. So how did Eswatini then agree to this? These inmates are even termed barbaric, as you've just said. What's the immediate risk then to citizens? Are they even consulted prior to these agreements? And what exactly is the process that is involved in this?
I think this is quite a great question because it also then enables us to also do some sort of analysis in terms of the capabilities of our ministers, particularly in Eswatini. We've been hearing prevailing sentiment that even some of the ministers, particularly the cabinet ministers, did not really have an idea of what was going on. And so we ask ourselves other questions, such as they've been saying that there's been quite a number of high-level engagements that are said to be, outside the boundaries of these cabinet ministers' knowledge. So it's really concerning, and I think we really need to find, a way in which there could be some sort of diplomatic setting, revisiting much of, the treaties and some of, the rules or laws that govern and influences that which must happen with regards to the Migration Act of various countries.
Very concerning indeed, especially on that point of yours, Doctor, that there could be a potential that, of course, these deportees could actually be used as some sort of bargaining chip or other mission. So it's something that really needs to, to be focused on by, I suppose, some African leaders at this point. Doctor, thank you so much for that valuable information there. That is Dr. Siphetfo Dlamini. He's a political analyst there on the United States dumping its undesired offenders in Eswatini.